Part 2. According to Wikipedia under Goree, Goree. Subtitle, History and Slave Trade. Cutting to the chase, listen closely. Quote, Goree is a small island 900 meters in length and 350 meters in width, sheltered by the Cape Verde Peninsula. Being almost devoid of drinking water, the island was not settled before the arrival of Europeans. The Portuguese were the first to establish a presence on Goree in 1450, where they built a small stone chapel and used land as a cemetery. Listen closely. The island of Goree was one of the first places in Africa to be settled by Europeans, as the Portuguese settled on the island in 1444. It was captured by the United Netherlands in 1588, then the Portuguese again, and again the Dutch. They named it after the Dutch island of Goree before the British took it over under Robert Holmes in 1664. Stop. Bingo. So as you can clearly hear, there was an uninhabitable island in which the Portuguese, Netherlands, Portuguese again, the Dutch, and the British took turns to export slaves and merchandise from Africa. Oh yeah, please remember when it said, quote, the Portuguese were the first to establish a presence on Goree in 1450, where they built a small stone chapel and used land as a cemetery. It will loom huge in the future. Okay, let's continue for more clues, shall we? Listen closely. Quote, in the 18th and 19th century, Goree was home to a Franco-African Creole, or Métis, community of merchants with links to similar communities in St. Louis and the Gambia, and across the Atlantic to France's colonies in the Americas. Stop. Regional flip bingo. Why regional flip bingo, you ponder? Well, if the Portuguese, Dutch, Netherlands, Portuguese again, and the British all had possession of the island as far back as 1444, and in the 18th century, the island is considered a Franco-African mixture, well, either the mad Frenchmen were the first people to have hot sex with the natives, or there was a regional flip to clear out the mixture of people who would have naturally been present. But let's continue for more clues, shall we? Listen up. Quote, Métis women, called Sennères, ironically, Signares, Sennères, from the Portuguese senhora, the descendants of African women and European traders were especially important to the city's business life. Bingo! Listen up. The Sennères owned ships and property and commanded male clerks. Notice, they only commanded them and did not own them. Quote, they were also famous for cultivating fashion and entertainment. Stop. Bingo. So as you can plainly hear, for it to say, quote, home to a Franco-African Creole or Métis community of merchants with links to similar communities in St. Louis and the Gambia and across the Atlantic to France's colonies in the Americas, and seeing Wikipedia tells us, quote, the French colonizing of the Americas began in the 16th century and continued on unto the following centuries as France established a colonial empire in the Western Hemisphere. To me, that can only mean, behold, just like the scriptures attest, our perfidious pursuers, you know, the ship-owning slave trader groups we discovered earlier who married Europeans to solidify merchandise alliances? Well, here is the first piece of evidence to prove our perfidious enemies were setting up shop before our ancestors arrived in the Americas. But wait! Put a bookmark here, for we shall return. According to Wikipedia under Métis, M-E-T-I-S, cutting to the chase, quote, the Métis are members of ethnic groups with an S native to Canada and parts of the United States that trace their descent to both indigenous North Americans and European settlers. Stop. So as you can plainly hear, these particular Métis were a mixture of Northern Indian and European. Okay, let's continue, please. Coming to the chase. Listen closely. Quote, people of mixed ancestry, although not of the Métis nation, have a distinct history of their own. These unions began in the east, extending from the Atlantic coast to the Great Lakes. Stop. Bingo! So as you can plainly hear, if these particular Métis are Northern Indians and European, and it just said, quote, people of mixed ancestry, although not of the Métis nation, have a distinct history of their own, and we just read of a Franco-African Creole across the Atlantic to the Francis colonies in the Americas, to me that can only mean, again, behold, our perfidious enemies setting up shop before our ancestors arrived. I know this understanding is correct because of what they say next. Quote, after the fall of New France to the British in 1763, many mixed race populations with an S continued to establish themselves, often specializing in the fur trade and relating hunting. English and Scottish traders married indigenous women, often the daughters of high-ranking chiefs, forming an elite mixed society. As the 18th century ended, the fur trade moved westward into the plains. Example, bingo! So as you can plainly hear, and just as the scriptures and the first video attest, this is the real reason you had dark-skinned, beardless people all over the place in the Americas. The other traders in America that were not Métis, in particular, the many mixed race populations, were the exact same African trader group / Psalms 83 gang delegations who were setting up shop and laying down a clone minefield under the guise of supplying the British Americans with our ancestors. Now that that's established, let's go back to the original Gorey article, shall we? Where were we? Oh yeah, we just found out Africans, which included the Psalms 83 gang, came, quote, across the Atlantic to Francis colonies in the Americas. But before we continue, allow me to ask you a question, gentle strangers.